Well, that was fun. Okay, so before I start taking this apart, I'm just going to put a little bit of plus gas on here, which is just going to loosen that up. And that's going to have like a capillary action. It's going to work its way into the thread. Also just going to work any rust that's on there loose. If we loosen it up now before we start taking the pads out, it's just going to make life that little bit easier. Yeah, it's alright, it's not too tight. You could always put a rod in between a couple of bolts pushed in there if you needed to sort of counteract that a bit, but it's not in too tight. So it's loosened, but not going to take it out, just going to leave it loose like so. We're just going to open up the brake fluid reservoir and take the lid off because we've been pushing the pads back and we don't want that brake fluid compressing up inside the system. So there's a little plastic cover here over the brake fluid reservoir. It's on the driver's side in the UK models, which will be on the passenger side in the US and European. You look around here, you can just see the tab there. You just pull that tab back, and as you put it back, the whole kind of thing levers hinges off. It's got a nice little hinge action there, and then it just pulls out, and there's another tab at the front actually as well there. So that comes off. Just going to take the lid off. So yeah, so if we can press the brake fluid back up the system, it's got somewhere to go. And if it does happen to go over, we've got a bit of a rag there. Okay, so on the left hand side of the vehicle, which is the driver's side in America and Europe, and the passenger side in the UK, the brake pad wear sensor is located here. So you probably want to try and put it off with a pair of long nose pliers. You'll probably find that fails. Easiest thing to do. Oh, actually, look at that, just putting it off with my fingers. That's unusual, don't normally come off that easily. And it just roots around the back into this clip. Now you are going to want to replace this clip. These clips very often go, they're very brittle, very fragile. In fact, I think it's just gone as I pulled it out there. So you're definitely going to want to get a new one of those clips. It just goes on the metal bit of that brake fluid connection that's just there. So actually I think that's survived, but we'll put a new one on. And then once it's routed around there, it just comes around here. That's already undone, unfortunately. Pull it out just here. And then it comes down to this junction box. Unhook, and in the junction box, that's where the actual connector to the rest of the car's electronics is. Blue one's the ABS, you don't want that, you want the white one, which is the brake pad wear. Just in case of squeezing that in. There we go, squeeze it in, put it out, might need a bit of encouragement. That's it, that's how you remove the brake pad wear sensor, and refitting is a reversal of removal. Okay, so now we can go ahead and remove the spring here. You're going to need a flat bladed screwdriver. I've got a selection. And all you do is you press up and out. So this way and this way to bring that spring out. Up and yeah, like that. Okay, so now we need to remove these dust caps on there. Remove dust caps, and then it's a 7mm hex bolt to remove the actual pins. Again, these shouldn't be in too tight. 30 or 40 newton-meters, I think. There we go. Yeah. Not a great deal of lateral stress on these at all. There we go. That's it there. Okay, so I've removed the two piston sliders here, which go in here and underneath. Okay, let's get in there. That's a little bit of play now. There we go, and that's going to move now. Now I've got something to hold this up and mustn't leave it hanging by the rubber thread. Right, so I'm just going to wind the piston back into the brake caliper there, and I'm going to use a G-clamp. I do have a wind back tool, so I can't find it, so let's use a G-clamp. Obviously I'm going to leave that on there to give me a service to purchase on with G-clamp. There we go. And note if this is the first set of pads you've changed on your X1, and these cars, it's unlikely I guess with the age of them, but if it is, then you might get an extra bit of seal here, gluing it to the actual piston here that BMW put on for some reason on the first set. No idea why they did. Still got a bit of life in it actually, but they did need doing. Okay, so now we're just going to go ahead and clean up all these surfaces where the pads are bearing on as they come in, just to avoid any brake squeal. Once we clean those up, we're going to remove the pad carrier here, just a couple of 16mm nuts on the rear here. Okay, so now we're going to loosen up the 16mm nuts at the rear of the brake pad holder. You are definitely going to need a long wrench to get these bolts on. They're held on to quite a high torque. So I'm going to try with my torque wrench. If not, I'm going to use the breaker bar. There it goes. Nice and easy if you have the right tool. If you just use a spanner, that will be a pig to get on in. Easy when you got the right tool. Okay, so now that those bolts are loosened up, we can just remove them and take this pad carrier out. Okay. Okay, so now we can take the disc off of the hub, and again that's going to mean getting the I think there's 6mm PEX key onto that. It's already loosened up, so it should be straightforward. These will need to be replaced because honestly you do not want to get caught up by one of those. So I always recommend replacing those when you're doing the discs. You do the discs so infrequently, this costs less than £1. It's just not worth not doing it, if that makes sense. Also going to need a hammer to loosen that off, and I don't think I've got a hammer. Okay, now we can clean the rotor up. I'm just going to use this sort of abrasive pad just to get a little bit more off there. A couple of little white deposits there, not sure what they were, but you definitely don't want them on when you get your new rotor on. You don't want any sort of imbalance to come into that system. Give it all a bit of a clean. Okay, that's now looking like it's ready. So I'm just going to put a little bit of ceramic brake disc paste just around the edge and around the hub bit here, and then that way when the new disc goes on, it's just going to be that much easier to take off next time. So I'll get this paste on, and then I'm going to put some clean gloves on to get the new disc on, because I don't want any grease to be going on that disc. So we're going to also put a new one of these on as well. Okay, so I've got the ceramic brake paste here. It's going to, just like I said, just put a little bit around the edge and a little bit around this hub bit as well. Yeah, the screw's going to go there. That's it. Okay, obviously we'll talk that up later, but for now that's absolutely fine. Okay, so now that the disc is on, now we can go ahead and put the brake pad carrier back on, and now we will torque this up to the specified torque, which I'll put on the screen for you now. Okay, now that we've got it held in, we're just going to torque this up. And the torque for the brake disc retaining that here, and I recommend using a new one, 16 Newton meters. Reason for using a new one is you're going to have started to round off the hex entry there, so I just recommend using a new one, just make life easy for next time. So it's only 16 Newton meters, not a great deal of torque. You are going to have to counterbalance this somewhat. If you find it's too hard to do by hand, then you could put a couple of road wheel bolts in there and put like a steel bar to the ground and counterbalance against that. So now we're going to go ahead and torque up the brake pad holder retaining bolts to 110 Newton meters. There it goes, that is proper tight. And the other one. That's it, there it goes. Okay, so now that that's torqued up, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put some ceramic grease into these crevices here, because that's where the brake pads are going to be travelling. I want to make sure that they've got an easy job of it. Okay, time for the new pads. Obviously this one will just go straight in. Okay, you might find the clips are a little bit wide when you put this in, so it's totally okay to just push them in a bit. There we go. So now we can undo the holder. Hopefully you've got a clip for yours. Get rid of that. And put that back onto the actual rotor. There we go. Okay, with these pins, they can get seized up, so do be careful, but I think this will be fine. So plenty of grease on the thread and also on the shaft, and then push each one home, and then it tightens in with a 7mm hex bit. Okay, that'll do. And you can actually see as you push it in, you can see it coming through, so that helps you just align it up a bit. You obviously don't want to do it up all the way. Okay, so now we're going to torque up the brake caliper retaining pins. 35 Newton meters is the number you're going to need for that. So not terribly tight, but there's not a lot of stress going on. I'm in that lateral direction anyway. It's all rotary, so yeah, there it is. Okay, so the final step is to install the anti-rattle clip, and a lot of people struggle with this quite a bit. Some people put these ears in first and then try and do one tab and then do another tab. That's not going to work. You'll be fighting it. The best thing to do is to get both of these ends of the spring, and it is a spring clip, located on the outside of the pad carrier here, and then get a screwdriver in underneath here and push the whole thing up, and then these ears will locate into the holes there. So that's what we're going to attempt to do. I have a selection of screwdrivers, so it's going to just pry it away slightly, and obviously you don't want it pushed in all the way, so you've got to sort of balance it a little bit, but you can see how it's just on the edge there and just on the edge there. Let's try the larger screwdriver, I think. There it goes. Look at that. Alternative method worked. Obviously make sure you replace the dust covers on the pins for the caliper on the rear there. Okay, so just going to fit the new clip for the brake pad wear sensor. There it goes. Okay, it's just going to fit the new brake pad wear sensor, and you can see the place where it needs to go. Now it's important that the sort of the notch here goes facing this way, because that's the bit that's going to wear down. So just go ahead and push that on, and it literally is just a case of pushing on. Yeah, you can feel now that's in solidly now, and then that clip will just hold on to the cable just there in between those two rubber bits there. That's it, there you go. That's it. It plugs straight in. There's a little tab, there it is. There it goes. Now that's clipped in. Okay, so that's the ABS sensor, the blue one. Okay, that's it. Okay, so just before you go, just one last really important tip to remember. Once you've completed the renovation of your brakes, whatever you're doing to them, do make sure that you get inside the vehicle, and before you go anywhere, start the engine and just pump that brake pedal a few times to make sure that all of the slack that you've introduced by pushing the pistons out is taken out, so the pistons are then pushed back in, ready to grip. If you don't do that, as soon as you pull away and you need to brake, you'll press the brake pedal, nothing will happen because those pistons are just coming in. You have to press it several times and potentially you could have an accident. So do be careful. Be sure to pump that brake pedal before you pull away several times until you can feel a really good resistance, and then you're good to go. The second thing to remember is for the first 50 or 60 miles or so, do make sure to drive a little bit more carefully, leave a little bit more of a stopping distance, just because your braking performance for the first few miles isn't going to be ideal. The surfaces of the brake pad and brake disc are just bedding into each other, so you do need to give it a few miles or a few kilometers if you're in Europe just to bed in. After about 50-60 miles, maximum 100 kilometers, something like that, you are good to go. So that is how you change the brake pads and discs on your BMW X1. You'll notice that I've used EBC Greenstuff pads, and I've deliberately not put any grease on the rear of the pads. That's because EBC put this anti-squeal pad on the back of the actual brake pad itself, and they specify that you must not put any grease on the rear. I highly recommend these Greenstuff pads. Not only are they good for the environment, they're very high performance as well, and a great compromise between performance and efficiency, so they should last a decent length of time, but also should give you really good braking, much better than the stock BMW pads that you'll get out of the factory. So I hope that helps. See you in the next video. That is really tight. Hey. Oh, come on. You gonna stay with me, boy? Are you gonna stay with me? Oh, okay. Right, so there we go again. A case of falling over light. Woof. Outside of the pad carrier. Piece of shit. What a stupid moron designed this crap. Simple as that.